Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about NAS expansions, and I know damn well that I've probably lost about 90% of you by the end of that sentence. Why? Well, NAS expansions, although incredibly useful and kind of necessary, are super duper dull. They are one of those things that once you find you need to get one, the more research you do, the more you will for the sweet kiss of death. It is just one of the dullest subjects ever. The reason being, the NAS expansion isn't like a NAS. Although most of the things we talk about on this channel are fantastically niche at the best of times, a NAS expansion is so basic that the more research you have to do, the worse it gets. So QNAP is one of the brands that has one of the largest arrays of expandable NAS devices out there. For example, they have NAS expansions that cover USB in multiple forms. They have ones that have SAS expansions. They've got Thunderbolt expansions. They've got desktop expansions. They've got Rackmount expansions. They've got expansions that have RAID inbuilt. They have RAID. They have non-RAID expansions. They've got upgradable expansions. They have a multitude of different ones out there. And ultimately, if you own a QNAP NAS, and you're finding that you need to upgrade your storage with an expansion device, there are just so many to choose from. Now, these two 4-bays have been selected for two reasons. One, because they are what I would consider the most acceptable tier, the lowest rung. There are 2-bay versions of this that have a higher speed at USB 3.1 Gen 2, and that is at 10 gigabits per second. However, a 4-bay expansion, for me, should be considered the minimum, because if you're upgrading your storage, then chances are that you want it to last a while, and 2 bays isn't a vast amount. The other reason I've picked these two devices is they look so damn similar. The majority of the expansion devices out there, you can kind of get a good feel of the difference in hardware design, be they more metal casing or more enterprise and the others more home. But these two 4 bays are incredibly similar, yet internally very, very different, and have very different price tags, with more than £110 to £115 price difference between them. Now, this device here, as I've probably already said on screen, is the TR-004. It is a hardware RAID enabled expansion device. This one utilizes USB 3.0 or USB 3.1 Gen 1 or USB 3.2 Gen 1. Seriously, Intel's so many different versions, but this device arrives with its own RAID support. That means that you can put drives inside, set the switch on the rear to create a RAID 0 or a RAID 1 or 10 or a RAID 5. And that means that your NAS will not have to utilize as much of its CPU and memory to support that new expanded RAID. Now, the TL series, this one, the TL-D400S, is JBOD only. That's just a bunch of drives, and it means that this device relies on the NAS to handle the RAID, to create a RAID system, and ultimately to allow you to bolt on a new pile of extra storage. Now, despite the fact that this one is JBOD and this one is already hardware RAID, this is the more expensive one, and a lot of you want to know why. Why would I spend more to get a device that can seemingly do less? They both have got 4 bays, so you've already got a limitation about the media you can put inside, be it hard drive or SSD. And if we take a good look at them, as I mentioned, they are remarkably similar in design. Look at them. The two of them have got exactly the same chassis. Same lockable tray, same LEDs there at the top, same ventilation. But it's when you turn them around that you learn more. So if we turn these devices around and we look at the rear ports, that is where the main differences are. So if we look there, we can see that this box utilizes USB-C. USB-C on this box here, and this has a SAS connector there on the rear. It's got a few other switches for fans and noise and stuff like that, but mainly it's those two ports there on the side in the middle. Now, the reason that's important is because this device, if you populate it with enterprise grade hard drives like 7200 hard drives, 7200 RPM drives, like, you know, Tiggo Unwolf NAS based hard drives, they're 7200, 256 megabytes of cache, or even more enterprise level hard drives, or SSDs in fact, if you want to use SSDs inside, each of which will give you 400 to 500 megs generally, with an increase each time. This is going to bottleneck. at 500, because USB 3.0 slash etc. that will only give you 5 gigabits per second or 500 megabytes. This device and its proprietary SAS connection, although it doesn't have the internal RAID, thanks to that connection and the card and cable that it includes, it means that if you've got a PCIe equipped NAS or PC, this can give you, with the right media, up to 1500 megabytes per second. So with the right media inside, this can be pushed really high. But again, it does depend on the media you use, the connected device, and the RAID configuration you choose. But still, nevertheless, this will give you higher speeds compared with this. Now, obviously, if you're using bog standard drives, like a 1 TB or 2 TB drives, you're probably not going to hit that bottleneck, and both of these devices will give you the same throughput. And in fact, that will probably outperform it, because this one is still going to need the NAS to leverage some of its existing CPU and memory assets to support this RAID configuration, something that won't need. But the fact still remains, the reason this one is more expensive is because it has a higher potential speed open to it at the beginning. This device, on the other hand, is always going to have that limitation moving forward. And although traditional hard drives are SATA, so an average hard drive which has a SATA connection like that one on the top, this SATA drive will give you 200 maybe, depending on the quality of the drive, but it will give you around 200 to 250 megs. And with each additional drive in the right RAID, it will increase your speed by somewhere between 70 to 120 megabytes per second, depending on the build quality of those drives. So the USB 3 on that, although each of those bays is SATA, so 6 gigabits per second, you're still going to have that throughput limitation on the end if you RAID them together. And that's the main difference between these. Because if you've got a NAS with a PCIe slot, with the exception of a few ARM CPU NASs, generally it means that your NAS is going to have a decent CPU. Maybe it's going to have maybe an Intel Core, maybe it's going to have a Pentium, or maybe it's going to have a Xeon or an AMD based processor like the 73 series. What I'm saying is, this, with its PCIe upgrade, is designed for NASs that have got 64-bit x86 based processors to make the most of it. And that's really how you should choose. Because if you have an available PCIe slot that you don't plan on utilizing for SSD caching days or 10GBE down the line, then this is the better choice. It may cost 100 DIC or more, but the percentage of increased read and write, you can't ignore that. And plus it comes with all this paraphernalia, and even though both of them are available for support on PC and NAS platforms with limited Mac support, it's worth highlighting that as these get bigger and they get more bays, like the 8-bay expansion, the Rackmount expansions, the 6-bay that's on the horizon, the 106 CT, and this has 6-bay, 8-bay, 12-bay and 16-bay Rackmount desktop solutions. As you get bigger, the speeds scale up, particularly in the case of this, where the 1600S arrives with a throughput of up to 5,000 megs, thanks to multi-cabled PCIe connectivity. So that's why they're more expensive. And if that sounds like something you want to take advantage of, maybe you're running an AI setup or a flash setup, definitely consider this one. But if not, if you're a home user or a small business user that just needs a bit more storage and didn't intend to use media where that 500 meg connection between it and the NAS would prove a problem, then definitely go for that one. And ultimately, either one of these is a great NAS expansion. It's just a lot easier to understand the entire range when you know that TR means hardware RAID and TL means proprietary SAS connection. And that covers the entire range, and hopefully this has helped you choose the right expansion for you. Now, do let us know if you need any more help with this. You've got the comments below, you've got the link to NAS Compares and the link to span.com. On top of that, don't forget to click like if you've enjoyed this, and subscribe if you want to learn more about not just expansions, how about some interesting stuff? How about just NAS and Plex and Thunderbolt and stuff like that? So do let me know if that's something you want to get on board with. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.